The photo that set the NBA on fire. One innocent golf outing may have just created the most explosive NBA rumor of the summer, and at the center of it are Stephen Curry, Jayson Tatum, and a question nobody expected to be asking: could the greatest shooter of all time actually finish his career in Boston? It started far away from an NBA arena. Curry and Tatum were spotted at a golf event in Martha's Vineyard during former President Barack Obama's birthday celebration. On the surface, there was nothing unusual about it. Two NBA champions, two superstars, one relaxed afternoon around familiar faces. But once photos began circulating online, fans stopped seeing a golf course. They started seeing a potential blockbuster. Within hours, social media was flooded with theories. Curry was in Massachusetts. Tatum was nearby. Boston had reasons to search for another elite star. Golden State was facing major questions about how much longer it could realistically build a championship contender around its franchise icon. Suddenly, what should have been a harmless photo became evidence in an imaginary investigation, and that is where this story gets dangerous, because there is a massive difference between something that looks interesting and something that has actually happened. No confirmed trade was announced. Curry had not publicly demanded out. The Warriors had not officially placed him on the market. And Boston had not been confirmed as submitting a formal offer, but the rumor refused to disappear, because underneath the speculation were real basketball questions that neither franchise could completely ignore. Boston could imagine what Curry's gravity would do next to Tatum. Golden State had to think about Curry's future, his contract, and the final chapter of an era that changed basketball forever. And Curry himself stood in the middle of it all, still wearing Warriors colors, while the rest of the NBA tried to write his next chapter for him. So, was that golf photo nothing more than two stars enjoying an afternoon together? Or did it accidentally expose a possibility that could become much bigger if circumstances change? Because once you understand what Boston needs and what Golden State is quietly fighting against, the rumor starts looking very different. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments. If you believe Curry should finish his career with the Warriors, come on. If you would want to see Curry and Tatum together in Boston, come on, dude. And subscribe to the channel, because the next part reveals why Boston suddenly makes far more sense than most fans realize. Why Boston suddenly makes sense. The reason this rumor refuses to die is simple. Boston does not need another good player. Boston needs another player who can bend an entire defense. That is why Stephen Curry changes the conversation, put him next to Jayson Tatum, and every possession becomes a problem for the opponent before the ball even crosses half court. Curry's movement pulls defenders away from the paint. His shooting forces big men to step higher. His gravity creates driving lanes that normally do not exist. And for Tatum, that could mean fewer possessions attacking two bodies at once and more opportunities to punish single coverage. But the appeal goes deeper than basketball fit. The Celtics are operating under pressure. Their championship window is not theoretical anymore. Tatum is in his prime. The expectations are enormous. And any season that ends early becomes another year lost from the best stretch of his career. That creates the kind of urgency that makes front offices consider moves they would normally dismiss as unrealistic. The sample rumor grew even faster because Boston was already being discussed as a team searching for a new high-level partner for Tatum. Once Curry appeared in the same social orbit, fans connected the dots immediately. It did not matter that a golf photo proved nothing. The basketball logic was powerful enough to keep the fantasy alive, and that is the first reason this story has survived every denial. Boston can look at Curry and see more than a famous name. It can see spacing, leadership, championship experience, late game shot creation, and the kind of attention that would make life easier for everyone around Tatum. But there is a problem with dreaming this big. For Boston to even explore a move of this size, Golden State would first have to confront a question it has spent years avoiding. What happens when the Curry era is no longer guaranteed to continue exactly as it always has? Golden State's hid a problem. For more than a decade, the Warriors never had to ask what their identity was. Stephen Curry was the identity. He was the system, the symbol, and the player around whom every championship decision made sense. But dynasties do not end because people suddenly stop caring. They end because time starts winning arguments that loyalty cannot settle. That is the uncomfortable pressure underneath every Curry rumor. Golden State can want him to stay and still understand that the roster, the contract timeline, and the age curve are moving in different directions. Curry may still terrify defenses, but the organization has to prove it can create another legitimate championship path before the remaining window closes. That is where speculation found oxygen. If the Warriors cannot build a roster good enough for another deep run, the question changes. It is no longer, would Curry ever leave? It becomes, how much frustration would it take before everyone involved has to consider options they never wanted to consider? The sample repeatedly returns to that tension. Commentary around the Warriors describes the franchise thinking about both the final years with Curry and the future after him. Those are not the same conversation. But once they happen at the same time, every rumor becomes louder, and Curry's position matters more than anyone else's. If he remains committed to finishing in Golden State, the Warriors have every reason to protect that ending, but if the roster stalls, the championship ceiling disappears, or extension talks become complicated, even a small crack could become the biggest story in basketball. That is why Boston's interest, real or imagined, feels so explosive. The Celtics represent an immediate gamble on winning now. Once that contrast became clear, the rumor stopped being about one photograph. It became a question of whether Golden State can still give Curry the ending his career deserves. How a hypothetical became breaking news. The strangest part of this saga is that the loudest version of the story did not begin with a confirmed trade call. It began with a hypothetical. In the sample, a Celtics-focused column explored the idea that if Golden State ever became willing to listen on Curry, Boston should be aggressive enough to call. That is very different from saying the Celtics had already made an offer, but on social media, the difference between should call and did call can disappear in minutes. One headline becomes a screenshot, the screenshot becomes a post, the post becomes a reaction video. Then fans see Curry and Tatum together at a golf event, and suddenly the theory feels visual. Now there is a picture, a destination, and a star pairing that makes sense on paper. The rumor no longer feels abstract, even if the foundation underneath it has not changed. That is how speculation becomes momentum. The more people repeat it, the more legitimate it starts to sound, and once insiders respond even to deny it, the rumor receives another life cycle because fans ask why so many people are discussing something supposedly meaningless. The original columnist later clarified the distinction between opinion and reporting, but by then, the internet had already built an alternate reality around the idea. Trade packages were proposed, salary numbers were calculated, Celtics fans debated sacrificing the future, Warriors fans defended Curry's legacy. All that happened before the central fact changed. There was still no confirmed trade request from Curry and no confirmed official offer from Boston in the sample's own telling. But once a rumor reaches that level, facts are no longer the only force keeping it alive. Emotion is, and the next wave arrived when Warriors insiders started pushing back hard. Insiders start fighting back. The louder the rumor became, the faster people close to the Warriors tried to shut it down. That should have ended the conversation. Instead, it made the story even bigger. Multiple voices cited in the sample pushed back on the idea that Curry was preparing to leave. The message was consistent. He had not requested a trade. Golden State was not treating him like a player it wanted to move. And the Boston scenario was being discussed far more aggressively outside the organizations than inside them. One Warriors side reaction was especially blunt. The position was not framed as unlikely. It was framed as something that simply was not happening. Another reporter reportedly addressed the rumor while celebrating his own wedding anniversary, then returned to his personal life after making the point, that moment is almost funny. But it reveals something important about NBA rumor culture. Sometimes a denial does not stop speculation because fans interpret the denial as part of the drama. The stronger the pushback, the more some people assume there must be something worth pushing back against. But the evidence presented in the sample points in a simpler direction. Curry's camp was described as still wanting a Warriors ending. Golden State was described as wanting the same thing. Boston had not submitted an official offer, and the original source of the frenzy clarified that his piece was opinion, not a report of a completed negotiation. So why did the story survive? Because the basketball fit was still attractive. The contract questions were still real. And Boston fans could imagine a future where one change in circumstances reopens everything. The rumor did not need to be true today to remain interesting tomorrow. And once people accepted that, the conversation moved to the next level. If Curry ever did become available, what would Boston actually have to give up? The price could be insane. This is where the fantasy starts becoming painful. It is easy to say Boston should trade for Stephen Curry. It is much harder to explain what Boston would have to surrender if Golden State ever listened. The sample lays out multiple hypothetical frameworks, and every version carries the same warning. This would not be a normal star trade. Curry's salary, status, and value to the Warriors would force Boston into a massive commitment, proposed packages centered on a large contract, useful rotation players, and major draft capital. Some versions push the cost even higher, imagining several first-round picks just to create an offer strong enough for Golden State to consider. That is when the dream becomes a front office nightmare. Every asset Boston sends out is one less piece available to protect Tatum and Curry during a long season. Every first-round pick traded is one less chance to add young, cheap talent later. Every role player included makes the bench thinner. And if a third team is needed to help with salary mechanics, the number of moving parts becomes even more complicated. So the real question is not whether Curry is worth a giant price in a vacuum. The question is whether Boston would be buying a championship window or mortgaging the future for a window that could close faster than expected. Curry is still Curry. That is why the idea is seductive. But a team acquiring an older superstar has to pay for what he can do now, while accepting that time never negotiates. If Boston gave up too much and then suffered one injury, a move that looked brilliant in July could look reckless by April. That is the tightrope. At the top, Curry and Tatum could look unstoppable. Below them, Boston could become dangerously thin. And if the fit is truly that terrifying, one championship might still make the sacrifice feel worth it. Curry and Tatum would terrify the league. Forget the rumors for a moment and imagine only the basketball. Stephen Curry runs off a screen on the left side. Two defenders jump toward him because neither wants to surrender an open three. Jayson Tatum catches the ball on the opposite wing with one defender suddenly stranded on an island. That is the nightmare Boston would be buying. Curry does not need to dominate the ball to dominate a defense. His movement can destroy a coverage before he ever touches it. And that is exactly why pairing him with a scorer like Tatum would be so dangerous. Tatum would see cleaner driving lanes, help defenders would arrive later. Switching would become more complicated, and late in games, Boston could choose between Curry's shooting gravity and Tatum's size depending on what the defense gives away. It would also attack one of the biggest problems elite playoff offenses face: predictability. When a defense knows where the primary action is coming from, it can load up early. Curry changes that because his location is an action by itself. One cut can move two defenders. One relocation can erase a double team. One deep three can stretch the floor farther than most systems want to defend. But the fantasy has another side. Curry would need to be managed physically over a long season. Boston would need enough depth to survive nights when he rests. Tatum would still carry an enormous burden. And if the trade removed too many defenders, shooters, o pelhenlos, the Celtics could create an unbelievable starting group while weakening the structure supporting it. A super team only works if the players around the stars can survive the minutes when those stars are tired, trapped, hurt, or sitting still. If Boston believed one final superstar swing could win another title, there may be no cleaner offensive partner for Tatum than Curry, and that is exactly why the contract situation becomes the next battlefield. The contract changes everything. Every blockbuster rumor eventually meets the same enemy, the contract, and Curry's situation is why this story can be both wildly unlikely and impossible to ignore. The sample repeatedly emphasizes the size and timing of his deal, along with future extension discussion. That gives Curry major leverage over how the final stage of his Warriors career unfolds. If both sides agree on a new deal and a competitive plan, most of the outside noise loses power. If those conversations become difficult, every rival executive starts paying closer attention, but salary alone makes a Boston move complicated. A contract of Curry's size cannot simply be dropped into another roster without consequences. Matching money could require Boston to send out significant salary, multiple players, or involve another team. Then come the draft picks. Then come the roster spots. Then come the second order effects created by the league's financial rules. This is why the cleanest version of the story is also the most important. Nothing meaningful happens unless Curry wants something different. Golden State has little incentive to trade the face of its franchise merely because another team can build an attractive package. Curry's value is not only measured in points, he represents identity, organizational credibility, and an era that transformed the franchise. The sample also introduces a fascinating possibility. Curry could prioritize helping Golden State remain competitive rather than maximizing every possible dollar. Even as a hypothetical that points in the opposite direction of a superstar forcing his way out, it suggests the first solution may still be internal. Give Curry a roster he believes in. Give him a real chance to compete. Find a contract structure both sides accept. If Golden State can do that, Boston remains a fantasy. If Golden State cannot, The fantasy becomes a question, and that brings us to the most important voice in the entire story. Curry and the people closest to him, what Curry's camp is really signaling after all the trade machines, social media arguments, insider reactions, and hypothetical packages. The story comes down to one thing. What does Stephen Curry actually want? The sample's answer is far less dramatic than the rumor. Reporting cited there describes Curry as still wanting to finish his career with the Warriors, while people around him have reportedly given no indication that his position has fundamentally changed. That matters more than any golf photo. Curry has never needed Boston to prove he can win. He already built a dynasty, changed the geometry of NBA offense, and became inseparable from the Warriors brand. Leaving would not simply be a basketball decision, it would change the final image attached to one of the strongest player-franchise relationships of the modern era. The sample goes further by describing the possibility that Curry could be open to financial flexibility if it helped Golden State add the kind of difference maker required for another serious run, whether that becomes reality or remains hypothetical. The signal is important. The priority appears to be competing with Golden State, not escaping from it, but sports rarely offer permanent guarantees. If the Warriors fail to improve, if the season goes badly, if extension discussions stall, or if Curry decides the championship path has disappeared, the conversation could change. That is the tiny opening rival fans see whenever this rumor returns. For now, though, the strongest evidence in the sample points toward loyalty, Curry has not requested out. Golden State has not made him available. Boston has not submitted the blockbuster offer. Fans keep building online. So the viral photo did not reveal a secret deal. What it revealed was how quickly the league is willing to imagine life after Curry in Golden State. And that is why the final chapter is not really about whether Boston can trade for him. It is about legacy, timing, risk, and the decisions that could define both franchises' legacy. Risk, and the decision that could define two franchises. After all the noise, the most important lesson is not that Stephen Curry is going to Boston. The evidence presented here does not establish that. The real lesson is that Boston and Golden State are standing close enough to major crossroads. That one photograph made the entire NBA imagine a future that does not exist yet. For Boston, the strategy is urgency. Jayson Tatum's prime is happening now. If the Celtics believe another superstar could push them from contender to favorite, they must decide how much future flexibility they are willing to sacrifice for a better chance at winning immediately. Curry's shooting, movement, experience, and gravity could transform the offense, but the cost could strip away depth and draft capital precisely when an older superstar needs support around him. For Golden State, the problem is more emotional. Curry is not merely an asset. He is the face of a historic era. The humane approach is not to treat loyalty as a slogan. It is to communicate honestly, build responsibly, and give him a clear picture of what the organization can realistically accomplish. And for Curry, the final years should not be reduced to internet pressure. Some stars chase one more ring elsewhere. Others choose to finish where everything began. Neither path should be treated as betrayal when the decision is made with respect and transparency. Right now, the strongest signal in the information surrounding this rumor still points toward Curry remaining a Warrior. But Boston's hypothetical interest exposes the larger truth. If Golden State wants that ending, it has to keep giving Curry reasons to believe in it. Championship window's close. Relationships do not have to end badly when they do. Now it is your call if Steph Curry should retire as a Golden State Warrior. Come on. If you would take the risk and pair Curry with Jayson Tatum in Boston, come on, dude. Tell us where you're watching from. And like the video. Share it with another NBA fan. And subscribe to the channel for more trade rumor, player stories, and NBA drama.